Yeah.
But I got dressed up for you too.
So basically, I should put on a shirt with buttons and go shave.
No, I'm good.
I thought about it.
Yeah, I thought about it too. I was like,
It's the thought that counts.
yeah, it is. All right, everybody, welcome to the NerdBrand Podcast. Oh, sorry, what? We'll start again. What? I thought you said something.
No.
Oh, okay. Now that's going to be the cold open.
Awesome.
That's gonna that'll work because that fits like what people probably expect from me. Anyways, all right, here we go. Welcome to the NerdBrand Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Jason. That's John, and this is Shane. Shane is from 520 East Brands, and today we're going to be talking about being real on social media and using your voice in branding. But for right now, Shane, I'm going to give you the floor to kind of tell the people who you are, what you do, what you love, that kind of thing.
Sure. So who I am, I'm Shane Schatz. I am a native Louisvillian who left for a long time, came back in 2002. And in 2008, I started this business basically because I said to my cousin, won't somebody just pay me to play on Facebook? And she said, yeah. So I started this agency. And so we are an outsourced voice for the brands we represent. We work with a lot of companies who either don't have time, don't have the know-how, or just don't want to deal with it, but they know that they have to have a social media presence. And a lot of times what they'll do is just set up a Facebook page and then they post on it for like 3 weeks straight. They have all this great stuff. And then a year later, they're like, we never did anything. And consistency is obviously key. So we will basically take over their social presence for them and come up with a strategy, a persona, and deliver on different social media platforms that make sense for their brand, their audience, and their budget to produce and grow a community. So we're not just about creating fans that like your Facebook page. We're really about engaging with people and building a community for raving fans around your brand. My favorite social media platform to do that is Twitter. I know people think that's crazy, but Twitter really is where you can talk back and forth as a brand to your consumer directly. And so I really love that. I feel that Facebook has become really more of a billboard over the years. Used to be very back and forth. But if you're involved in a Facebook group around a brand, that's a different beast. That's very engaging, conversational. So we just really like to talk to people, and we do it online. You asked what I really love. I really love my Peloton equipment. I'm kind of an addict. Everybody asks who my favorite teacher is, which means they don't follow me on Instagram because I'm basically stalking Olivia. She's my favorite. I love her. And I have a whole community of people who also love all of her workouts. It's fantastic. I have a husband who's working on the other side of the wall from me. I have 2 teenage kids, one who is leaving next year for college, and 2 yellow labs who are going to behave for the next hour.
I like how you just kind of...
I sent mine outside.
Glared. For those watching on YouTube, just search for us, Nerd. If you're on YouTube, go look for NerdBrand. You'll find the podcast and find this video. You'll watch Shane just kind of look over to the side, like it just basically telling and pointing at the dogs to be quiet. Well, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
So, being authentic. Social media, I like how you describe Facebook as a billboard. It does feel that way. About 2 years ago, I basically quit using it. Actually, it's more than that. I think I was done with it after 2017. And then I just kind of focused on LinkedIn more, considering I'm just a person and I just wanted to learn one platform really well as best I can. And Facebook was not that choice.
Well, and I will say LinkedIn, I really feel it does better person to person. There's not a lot of people who want to follow companies on LinkedIn, but connecting with people and talking to them, it is very Twitter-like if you give it the chance to do so.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think definitely. I mean, Facebook didn't used to be that way.
Right.
It went, and it's not a billboard if you have money to pay for the engagement and the exposure that you used to get, for free.
Right.
In the early days, Facebook was, it was killing everything.
Yeah, it was great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we started this business in 2008, so we used to be able to talk back and forth to people, but now it's a matter of paying for ads and forcing our content in front of those people and then to get them to talk. And, the society we live in today, it's unlikely they'll be like, I love you. They're more like, I hate you. And here are the reasons
looking for
why.
something
You're
critical.
the worst. Yeah. So that's kind of the way that Facebook has gone. I do feel that it's still important for business. And so we do still utilize it for basically every business we work on. But, it really depends on your business and where your audience, your community, where your people are. So like we have one client, he's really just on Instagram. The only reason he has a Facebook account is so we can run some ads on Instagram. But he's very visual. Everything he's doing is beautiful, pictures, video. So Instagram is where he gets engagement.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Talk a little bit about, just kind of, you've alluded to it a few times in terms of, we like to put brands where it makes sense for them to be. And I know it's a topic that's been kind of, beat to death for years, but still a lot of brands still and small businesses feel like they got to be everywhere. They've got to be on the next new thing. They've got to be, actively engaging in 4 or 5 different platforms. And I mean, from experience, and I've seen it myself too, it shoots them in the foot, and it's just not practical for most brands.
Right.
Unless I found a partner like you, probably, where they get extra resources. But talk about that.
But you definitely, you don't want to spread yourself too thin. You want to make sure if you're going to invest time, energy, and money into social media, pick the platforms that, number one, you think you can actually perform on, that you can be consistent, that you can come up with content, and that you've got customers on. If your people are not, so like for that example I gave, his customers, they may be on Facebook, but they're not looking for him on Facebook. They're looking to see, and we're very specific about what we post when. So he's got the special comes out every Wednesday. His consumers know, they go 10 a.m. on Wednesday. They look for that on Instagram. Mm-hmm. They're not looking for him on Facebook. So you need to make sure you're not spreading yourself too thin and that you are setting yourself up for success. And even when we start working with someone on an outsource, I mean, we also only have a limited number of hours. And so we'll kind of build a program for them that'll say, okay, these are the platforms that make the most sense for your brand. So let's start with these 3. And then they'll say, well, what if we want to add this 4th? Okay, well, let's see how we do on these 3. And let's build a community here first, rather than from the get-go trying to build for, especially, oh my gosh, these new businesses that are coming and they don't have anything on social yet. Now they want to build uphill 4 different platforms at once. That's a lot. And
in a world where organic isn't, it's really not there for a lot of platforms.
Right, exactly. So it really depends on what kind of business do you have, what kind of demographic do you have, and where are they? There are some businesses, they go all in on Twitter and they're really nowhere else to be found. And that's okay. It works for them. TikTok is a question I get a lot. I actually got this question yesterday from a client. They're a local family business. Their clientele is on the older side of a social media demographic. So we're talking like 45 to 65. They sell a good value, but a very expensive product. And so they said, should we be on TikTok? I'm like, well, there's a place for it. And there's definitely some fun we could have. But I really feel that your next audience, your next buyer is on TikTok. So let's kind of keep it on the radar and watch for it. And let's see what we do with it in 6 months to a year. I don't think we need to start it today, especially when we're on Houzz, Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and LinkedIn. So, those are the kinds of conversations we have with clients.
Gotcha. I think it plays in. I mean, Jason, if you want to kind of loop it into the show, it's like, well, then how do you choose those platforms? And it really comes down to, like you said, a lot of it is audience demographics, who you're trying to reach, but it's also what is your brand's just general aura? What's your voice? What kind of tone can you reasonably take? I mean, some brands really just wouldn't fit in Twitter. They just can't do that kind of short banter or short information type stuff. So I think, it plays into, if we're kind of talking about how do you choose those platforms that are best for you, you've got to really truly have a firm grasp of what is your authentic, your voice as a brand. What are you trying to convey to people?
And that voice attracts that audience. So if before you engage, probably even in social, you obviously have a voice of your brand. And so the brand voice it's just your distinct personality of your brand. So all the communications that kind of come out from your brand, that is it. Like you can hear, like with NerdBrand, there's our voice, not my audible voice. We're not talking about like what I sound like, because I know on recording I sound like one of those high pitched admins from 1950s, like commercials, like buy spark plugs at Radio Spark Plugs for $9.99. I know I have that kind of voice, but because we all want to sound like this, we want to sound really deep. And there was this old joke, like, wouldn't it be
I
funny?
want to sound deep.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be funny if we got to heaven and we expect God to have this booming voice and we get up there and he sounds like Mickey Mouse? That's just going to be hilarious if that's the case. But, we'll see. Anyhow, my point is that one person stands out because they're a great storytelling. Like there's people that we have seen speak publicly that have been absolutely engaging, and then there's others that we fall asleep. Well, that's their brand, from their voice. That's how they communicate. That's why people are drawn to them, because they enjoy listening and hearing and reading what they produce. Even if somebody else was to do the same thing but be like monotone with it, probably wouldn't be as effective. That's not the same as tone. Tone, you can have several tones in your brand. So in social, one channel could be playful, another channel could be formal. So on LinkedIn, you could be very formal, but on these other channels, you could be playful. And for us, this podcast, this is where we get to play. If you try and look at us in other channels, the business channels, not necessarily mine, then you'll see more formal type stuff kind of going out.
Right. And we're working with a client right now where they're very serious. They're in higher ed, so very professional faculty type professors, but they're also hiring, and they have a very fun office inside. So where we are making some decisions is LinkedIn and Facebook is very much for that outward audience, but for their hiring kinds of content, we're using Instagram and we're showing off their people and how much fun they have. And, they're closed for a company-wide mental health day. Hey, that's great stuff. Not something we're necessarily going to put on Facebook, but it's going to work on Instagram for recruiting.
Yeah. And recruiting, of course, is a big challenge right now. I mean, there's I know like the pharmacy up the road from me closed because they don't have a pharmacist. They can't hire or find anybody. And the BMV in my city where I live in New Albany, they closed it because they just don't have any workers. So the employee shortage is starting to show up, but so those jobs exist. And as far as I know, they pay pretty good, but why are they not able to fill those roles? And, we don't know. I'm not making any assumptions about any of these.
I couldn't make judgments.
Yeah. But your brand is an internal and external thing. So, you have to start looking at to when you start attracting an audience, it's going to be for several factors. Your company's culture, what people are saying and doing at work for you or work in the organization. Other people see that. And they have their own social channels as well. We've done a podcast before with John Steven Stansel about should employees have social media channels and should they be putting stuff out? And so if you want to listen to that, you can go back and listen to that and those thoughts and advice on that. But it's like, people still see that, and that can reflect, a brand and what's happening internal to make a decision on whether or not if I want to work there or if I want to be a part of that culture. So I
think it's the hiring issue is 100% a branding problem. That's kind of my philosophy. I mean, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same as trying to attract customers. You got to tell your employees stories. You got to give people a reason. They got to be able to latch on to something and feel good getting out of bed and coming to work or whatever.
Right. You can't just have customer testimonials. You've got to have employee testimonials as well. And I will just give a pitch for all those people who love to write reviews online, who get angry they're waiting on a long line or their order was wrong. Be nice to the people that showed up to work.
Yes, please.
Come on, man.
It's really unfair. I mean, regardless of what somebody is paid on the hour or what their salary is, the job is chosen or is there out of necessity or desire, for passion. But when some people come in and you're treated very, very badly, either internally or externally, they're not going to stay at that job. So if you really want, good service, be mindful of who's providing that service and be kind.
And remember, there's a social media person who has to respond to your negative Yelp review.
Yep, and they've got to walk just on eggshells all the time. And it's a very stressful job to do that. When we got into that job because it's social media and it was created out of fun and positivity. Like there's a lot of things that have happened over the week that, as of this recording, happened with Facebook and continue to unfold. We'll leave that to the news organizations to run those stories, but I think everybody that was listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. And toxicity is not good, no matter where it's at or where it's coming from or who it is. It's just not healthy. So,
right. And my friend Jeff Rushton has always said, use social media to put some good out into the world. So if you feel like you need to go online and write a review and you're angry at some business, pick a business you love and write a positive review about them instead. And just let the negative ones
simmer.
Yeah,
sit there a minute. Maybe you'll feel better tomorrow.
Take grandma's advice. You ain't got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all.
Exactly.
But authenticity on social media can be a game changer for any brand. According to a 2017, I guess this is pronounced Kahn and Wolf Authentic Brand Study, shows that in 2017, 91% of people are willing to reward a brand for its authenticity via purchase, investment, endorsement, or similar action. So that kind of dovetails into what we're talking about. Be nice, because all the brands that are online, they exist for a purpose of doing business. There is a financial gain for it. We'll put a link into that study in our YouTube description below, so that you can click on that and read that if you all like out there in the YouTube verse. But I kind of want to see what you all think. What define authentic or real to you, and what it sounds like maybe on social media, or if you've seen it, and what are some examples?
Well, I think it's important to be a human. Remember that even if you're, and I'll use Twitter as my example, even if you're tweeting as some company, you're still a person, and people will say, well, we're a B2B or we're a B2C. You're a person to person. You are one person talking to other people. And so when I'm on Twitter, whether I am being myself or I'm being a human who I'm representing or a brand, I just try to be real. And, I never copy and paste and do the same thing from client to client, because that's not what I do. But sometimes there'll be a running theme, and you'll see it on different Twitter accounts I handle, even though it's said in a different way, just depending on what's going on in the world that day. Maybe it's a hurricane and this client's talking about this client and I'm talking about it. And so we're all kind of taking that stance. But you just want to be authentic as a human. Just remember, and I just spoke about this last week at CM World, and I talked about the visuals. Stop trying to make your pictures so perfect. Not everything you put out on Twitter or in a story has to be like this high res, beautiful product photo. Yeah, filter those through. You are trying to sell your product, but take some selfies. And if it's not the most perfect picture, that's okay. It's real. It's in the moment, I said to you, I got up and actually put on hair and makeup today, which I don't normally do on Fridays. So, but I really could have just shown up in my glasses and my scrunchie and my pajamas and been real, but I didn't feel like doing that. So, but I think it's okay. It's okay to be real and to have a real voice, converse with people one-to-one. And most importantly, listen. Stop pushing your stuff out there. Buy my product, listen to me, use this coupon, visit my website. That should be a very little bit of what you're doing on social. Really, it should be much more conversational and just person to person.
Yeah. I mean, a lot about what we do with this podcast and having the guests on that we have, they're in our industry and advertising in some way, but they're all saying in some way, if you go back and review, they're all saying the same thing. And it's not us. It's not NerdBrand. NerdBrand is just providing an outlet for that, even though we have ourselves said this as well when we don't have a guest on the show. But at the end of the day, it's like, this is it's not a sales pitch. It's just, this is how people engage with media. And, being authentic to me is like, yeah, it's like you said, you just don't try to put on a facade. I mean, it just looks super, it doesn't look real. It doesn't look like I want to do it. I was talking with somebody before about like this podcast, like we have here on Zoom. Yeah, it's not overproduced. And when we move to a studio, yeah, the quality will go up because we're in a studio and there's extra hands now, touching the show moving forward. But it's so much more of the difference than that. I mean, it's still the same people. I will probably still show up in a superhero shirt, unshaven.
I would expect nothing less, Jason.
Yes, and everybody will be like, "Oh, it's that guy. He's just at a table with a different microphone." that doesn't look like Luke Skywalker's training tool. I don't know if you noticed that or not.
I got that.
Yeah. I
I
think
like
a
Star
lot of it
Wars.
goes back. I think a lot of it goes back to the last part of what you said, Shane. It's, for me, being authentic, and it's always been a struggle with social media, is how do you get your story across without being too pushy, without using it as a broadcasting mechanism. And to me, from an executional standpoint, I think one of the easiest things or simplest things to do is to engage your customers and get them to tell your story. And I know everybody says that, but it really is kind of the secret. Stop internalizing this desire to be authentic. What's authentic is that your customers, your clients, whoever they may be, had a positive experience. They had a positive change in their life. Something you did solve their problem. Let them tell that story.
Right.
There is nothing more
Exactly.
authentic than that. And I think that's, even for a local small business, I mean, those stories exist, because I know the next question is like, well, how do I activate that? How do I get people to share these things with me? I think so
It's
few
easier
businesses.
than you think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds dumb, but just ask.
Just ask.
You have to create the mechanism to give people that opportunity, whether that's, some kind of promotional landing page. I mean, you got to run kind of a campaign around it to incentivize and engage those people you want to respond. It's just the same as any other kind of advertising, approach. But, I see so few businesses just ask. They wait for those reviews to show up from Google or, Yelp or whatever. And then maybe they do check in on that. But so infrequently, they actually see a positive review and they're like, give themselves a pat on the back, and then they don't do anything with it.
Right. Yeah. So we try to repurpose those for our clients. So one of the things, I mean, I'm sure you've had this experience where somebody comes to do something, work on your house, right? A plumber or the bug spray guy. I always get this text right when he leaves. I get a text. Thanks for using our service. Will you fill out a review? And there's a link. I click. Yeah, you bet. I'm very happy. I don't see any more bugs. I'm happy to give you that review. So then on our end, when those kinds of reviews come in for our clients, well, then we'll take that, we'll copy paste, make a quick graphic out of it, throw it out on social. Look at how happy this client is. And then if it's a really great review, we'll have the client reach out to that customer and say, can we film you on video? Will you get on Zoom with our social media person and let her record this? And then we've repurposed that review again for a third time. So now it's out on the web, it's got a graphic, it's got a video. So, maybe it was such a great experience that it even becomes a blog post. So there's a lot of ways that you can take this one little instance and create some real content with really not a ton of thought. And if you're afraid of making graphics, we are not graphic designers, but we use Canva, and there's a free version. It's really simple. We don't have the free version, but we started with the free version until we sort of got a little bit better at this and needed more fonts. But I think that any small business owner really can invest in that. You don't need to go out to a graphic designer. Although if you want to do that and outsource it, certainly I can refer a few of those.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I have, is using real imagery, not stock and unclear art. So I did make the professional versus Canva argument, because on Canva it is quick, because social media is something that's very quick. You can put it out there. John's used Canva before, but typically, Mitch is in InDesign and Illustrator. He's not using that, and but to sit and create all that, you have to have the strategy. It has to be time.
Right.
If it's something that's very fast and has a quick turnaround, then yes, I can see the justification absolutely for Canva. Right. But still, everybody has a different eye for design. Everybody has a different eye for quality. Our job is to make sure that eye is still on brand, that it's still, and it's not just a matter of the correct colors, the correct logo. It's more than that. It's what it's what it's trying to convey. If your target audience is an older demographic, don't go grab stock imagery that has a bunch of young people standing and looking over a table.
Right, exactly.
I love those.
But we also, we will try to not use stock imagery as much as possible, where we'll get authentic images from the client and then lay it out in Canva. There's nothing I hate worse than seeing stock imagery, post, and they're all different accounts, same people. That's just not working for me. And sometimes it's a necessary evil. Sometimes the client just doesn't have the content, or we have a client right now we're working on some graphics for that need to go out on Instagram, and he's got the pictures, but he doesn't have permission yet. So in the interest of time, we're using some stock photos until he gets that permission. Then we can move on with the Google Drive.
That's a really good point to bring up. Like imagery, aside from getting into too deep in this, because I've been in this for a while, but it's like imagery is really getting cracked on as far as permissions and things like that. There's like 3 different kind of license types. And paying attention to that is very important, no matter what platform you're publishing on, because you do not want to get that dreaded cease and desist letter. And that's just all there is to it. I mean, John and I have both in the past worked for places that have gotten that. And sometimes they don't get a warning. They just say, here's the fine. So, you have to be very conscious about what the materials are, what you're using. And that's sort of where, you have to pay attention to your message more. You have to pay attention to where the images are coming from. And if you can afford it, budget for custom photography. A brand image person, like we have one on staff, her name is Coral, and she's a brand imagery expert, and she does brand consulting. I mean, her job is to help you walk through that process. Because it's invaluable, because later on when it gets down to you, Shane, it's going to be like, well, what am I using? And Coral and John will be like, this.
I have one client where they've got an internal graphic designer. And so we'll sort of lay out, this is coming up next week. Here's the kind of content I'm sharing, and I need some graphics to go with these pieces. And she's like, well, what do you want to put it on? I'm like, I'm not the artist. I don't know. You do it. Here, it has to say this. And then she's like, well, what color? Blue. I don't know. We all have our own specialties. And I think that that's another piece that's really important, is that, sometimes people will hire us and be like, well, can you also make all of these graphics? And can you also write a press release? And can you also, there's a lot of can you also, and we've talked about this in the chamber, how we got to know each other. Our industry has grown so much, and it isn't siloed, but it is segmented. Each of us handles such a different piece of the marketing puzzle, and all of them are important. And one of our favorite things is to come onto a client who has a team already. They've got a PR person, they've got an SEO web developer, they've got a brand creator, they've got an overall marketing person. Those are our favorite kinds of clients to work on, because we stay in our lane. We're working on creating conversation, making sure that what we're putting out there is authentic, making sure we've got good listening tools set up. But as far as all the other pieces, we're really relying on the specialists for that. And I think sometimes businesses, especially small businesses, don't yet get that each of these pieces are important, and each of them take a budget.
Yeah, they also figure that because I hired a marketing director, I now have a marketing department, and I have all those pieces now. And it's like, I've been to a orchestra like type concert before. I've never seen like the director get up with the wand and just wave it around in front of a bunch of empty chairs.
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, you know what? I never heard Beethoven's Fifth played like that. Well, what did it sound like? Like that, and it's sort of like what happens with your marketing strategy. You hire this person and they're like, I don't know what am I, they have enough time in the week they have to have time to think, whether they're in the shower washing their hair at home or whether they're in the office, it doesn't matter. You gotta have time to think about what it is you're going to do. Sometimes what the problem is and you can just tackle that one problem, but then the other things that is the expectation of the employer is that, what about the website and updating it and updating that? And you're just like, but can I get one thing at a time? I'm only a one-person show. And it's sometimes missed. I think that, and a lot of that I think has to do with how we've explained marketing has been poor. Shane, you and I in the chamber have gotten direct questions like, how does this all fit together? We don't really understand what's first, who's on third, whatever, and it's like, well, and I've made the argument before, because when I go to these groups, I mean, literally, I've been finding that, sitting there as a branding agency, they look at me for the marketing and I'm like, no.
Right.
And then they're like, well, can you do PR? Well, yeah, but there's Kim. We use her still actively on projects now. And it's like, no, I mean, we have I'm trying to, I'm hoping that the example is there because it's easier to learn by seeing than it is reading. And,
Mhm.
some of the people that we know, I hope they can see through the activity, like, oh, that's what Nerd Brand does. You guys are like in the business, like right next to the business folks, like next to the business strategy. John
Right.
made that point before, how we can't really separate ourselves from the business strategy, but
Mhm.
other service providers can, but we have to be in the chair. That way everybody's on task, on brand, on message. And
Right.
that's hard to pitch and explain and show what it looks like because it's a
Mhm.
complete intangible. But when you get those negative reviews, now it's tangible.
Right. Yeah. And what we do, as a social media engagement agency, we come way after what you do. And then you're still involved, but your work starts, I mean, it could be a year before we're brought into a business, at least in a perfect world, where you're developing all of these personas and messages and branding and everything that goes together. We come in and implement, but making those big decisions, I don't want that responsibility. You two take that.
Shane, we want to thank you for being on the show. We've had
My
a great
pleasure.
I
Absolutely.
hope everybody out there was able to take something away from this. If you're listening and you're like, you know what, I really need to next year up my game on social media, we'd love to talk with you. You actually now know who one of our preferred vendors are to help us out and help you out is now. So we would love to have that conversation. John, you got anything you want to plug? Anything before I just finally close this
Not
out?
us, but definitely Shane, if you want to kind of tell people where they can find you or your website and obviously on social.
Sure. So you can find me at 520eastbrands.com. People want to know where that name came from. I used to live in New York City at 520 East 72nd Street.
Gotcha.
So 520
I've always
East
wondered.
Brands. Yeah, that's what it is. 520eastbrands.com is where you can find us. You can find me on Twitter at 520 East Brands. I will always tweet you back. And Mondays at noon, you can find me live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube for my Let's Get Real show. And Jason was a recent guest. So if you missed it, you can catch up on YouTube.
There you go. There's all the deets, peoples. So as you're here on YouTube listening to us, make sure you like and subscribe, hit the bell, get the latest videos. We want to thank our recent subscribers. We've had 2 or 3 of you. Thanks you. You can tell it's Friday and I'm hungry because this is where I start to break down. This is like a thing in the show. I swear to God, guys, anybody out there listening to this, it is not a gimmick. Jason really is this goofy. Anyway.
Go have an almond joy.
I know. I don't like coconut either. So anyways, you can find us at NerdBrand Agency everywhere on social media. You can also find us at nerdbrandagency.com/podcast to listen to this latest episode or watch the video of it. We want to thank all of our listeners and subscribers. Once again, thank you, Shane, for being on the show. And to everybody out there, remember, keep your nerd brand strong.